what is up? Hope y'all are having an excellent day out there, living your best life, making great choices, being decent human beings. This week, I want to talk about some of the difficulties that can arise from mixing different cultural identities, different ethnicities, and just societal groups together. How the waters can get kind of muddy sometimes. And yeah, let's just go from there. So the text that I'm using primarily today as a reference text and kind of like background information, if you will, on this concept, it's called Borderlands by Gloria Anzaldúa. Pretty good. It's like a critical race theory type of textbook, but it reads very much so like, it reads like a novel, honestly, or like a autobiography, I guess, if you will. So it was published in 1987, and she goes over a lot of the struggles when they're living basically between two lands, so hence the name Borderlands. She's primarily writing from the perspective of a Chicana author at the U.S.-Mexico border, plus mixing in their Native American cultural identities and how it's just, you can feel very torn from in between all those different culture splices, essentially. And so she was talking about a lot of this sort of thing that I'm going to mention today with this blending of cultural identities. But she also mentioned a Mexican philosopher. His name was Jose Vasconcelos. And it was interesting because, you know, with like the Aryan theory, and they believed that they were looking for a pure race, right? And that was like, if it was like completely pure, then that was somehow superior. This is essentially, Vasconcelos' theory was the complete opposite. So he was envisioning an additional race. At that time, it was 6 races, where it embraces all the major races of the world, and taking all of those different mixtures of genes and racial pools, it would establish a superior genetic combination, which would then inherently bring out the complete and total consciousness of the borderlands. So, super interesting idea. You guys should definitely check it out. But Anzaldúa goes on to kind of talk more about some of the disconnect and the strife that can be caused by these clashes of voices, as she says. She said it creates an ambivalence, this internal strife resulting from insecurity and indecision. The mestiza's dual personality is plagued by psychic restlessness. So mestiza was an Aztec word for torn between ways. Anzaldúa kind of described it as a product of the transfer of cultural and spiritual values of one group to another, and they were always facing the dilemma of being that quote-unquote mixed breed. And so, again, we're talking, Anzaldúa's case specifically, she's talking about U.S. and Mexican borders where you're right there, kind of in the heart of it, and so you have those two cultures clashing, but then we always forget about the Native American culture that's right down there as well, so you have that third voice or cultural identity also clashing with these as well. And so yeah, she talked a lot about cultural collision. That's kind of like her terminology that she uses, but it's really, really interesting because, I mean, you know me, a lot of this stuff, I'm like, all right, anyone can raise an issue, anyone can acknowledge that there's an issue in our society, but like, you know, what's the solution? Where do we go from here? What's the future going to look like? And so she does talk a little bit about that, and she said that the future will absolutely belong to the mestiza. The work of their consciousness is to break down the subject-object duality that keeps her, quote unquote, her, you know, a prisoner, and to show in the flesh how duality is transcended. She said that the answer to the problem between the white race and the colored, between males and females, it all lies in healing the split that originates in the very foundation of our lives, our culture, our languages, and our thoughts. Unquote. So, super interesting stuff. I highly recommend it. If you guys want to check it out, give the book a read. Yes. Super awesome book. So yeah, what kind of stemmed off this whole episode as well, as per the usual, something happens and then it triggers me and then I go down a whole rabbit hole. I was having to write this essay, very, very, very long essay short on race versus ethnicity. And I was like writing and I was on this tangent and I was like, oh heck yeah, this is going great. This is just what I want. This is flowing. And then I kind of realized like, damn, differentiating between the two is kind of part of the problem, which I'll go into in a second. And then I realized, because, per the usual with me, I'm like, I'm just going to fix it myself. So I was trying to think of the solution and look at the future state of things for the next generations. And then I was like, damn, I don't know at all. I just discovered and buried myself in this insane hole of an issue. And I don't know how to fix it. So here I am mid-essay, and of course, it's due in a day. And I'm like, oh no, I just lost and burned my entire thesis. I have no idea. Basically, it kept boiling over. And then I was talking to my friend and I'm like, what the heck? This is not what this essay is supposed to be about. Also, I don't have the time to be trying to fix this societal issue that I just created myself in my essay. And my friend was like, dude, why are you viewing it as a problem? That's your first issue. This is not a problem that needs a solution. Because that itself, trying to solve it and trying to, compartmentalize it into this clear-cut issue and then a clear-cut solution, that's part of the problem itself. And she's like, it is what it is. It's a very fluid thing. You gotta let it be. And you need, she's like, maybe you need to go outside for a little bit. It sounds like you haven't seen the sun in a few days. And I was like, ooh, you're not wrong. So yeah, so that's kind of, just have that in the back of your mind. That's kind of the direction that this episode is going down. So before I really dive into race versus ethnicity versus nationality, I do think it is important to really kind of understand the current textbook definitions of each. So that way we kind of are all on the same page. And I say current because, as I'm about to discuss, this is a very fluid thing, and so this will 100% be changing. Already it's changing, essentially. So, nationality, I'm sure we're all kind of familiar. This is American. This is Australian, wherever the case may be. That's the nationality. Ethnicity and race is where it gets a little bit trickier sometimes to kind of differentiate. So, according to the, textbook Webster definition, the concept of ethnicity contrasts with that of race in that it is concerned with group cultural identity or expression, whereas race focuses on physical and biogenetic traits, unquote. So, if we're looking at someone from China, China is the ethnicity, Asian is the race. And in 2022, for the U.S. Census Bureau, they actually only officially recognized 5 races, indirectly 6 with an other category, but 5 races that they're officially recognizing that they have little boxes on government forms that you can check, and that's it. So we have white, we have black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, and the 5th one is Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. The 6th category is that other, just like a check all box. But yeah, officially, the U.S. Census Bureau only officially recognizes 5 races, which I think is super interesting. But obviously ethnicity, there's a whole lot more than 5 ethnicities. So that's where it dips into that kind of muddy water of cultural identity, social constructs and standings, languages, religions, things of that nature. And so it's so crazy because you guys remember I started this podcast and I use this podcast just for me to be able to kind of talk my way through some of these ideas that I have. It's really just an outlet for me, right? For some of these things that get buried in my little chicken brain and then it just kind of gets stuck there. But with languages, and I know I kind of talked about it with one of my last episodes, but this concept of ethnicity and languages, it's so interesting to me, but it gets kind of crazy because I'm trying to learn Korean right now, right? And your girl is struggling, first off, with some of these like verb forms and things, because I keep getting confused on he is Japanese or he is Korean or he is American versus he is from Korea or he is from Japan or he is from America, so on and so forth. And so it's so crazy to me because like I'm working on this and then I lose my dang Duolingo perfect 100% streak because I get the phrases wrong. But I'm looking at that and I'm like, dude, this is like exactly what I'm talking about in my podcast this week. You know, like this blur, even just in the languages, like the cultural ties and the identity and the meaning behind sentences and words. Like it just gets blurry for these things. Anyway, sorry, nerding out. But yes, I think it's super interesting. And so yeah, let's get into that muddy area. So back in the day, and this is also where it started off in my essay, I'm like, oh, this is too easy. Like racial segregation, like clear delineation between the races / ethnicity / nationality, because it was all, at that time, basically all three terms meant the same thing. You were from Africa, you were African, you were black. You were from, England, you were English, you were Caucasian, you were white. Like, that was just it. That was the only options they really had. There was no blending whatsoever. There were no, people marrying interracially or none of that, obviously. And so yeah, back then, it was a lot simpler of a concept. But today, it's just not that simple. So I like to think of a couple examples, and kind of this is where I dipped into my rabbit hole, right? Because I'm like, well, if we're going purely for race specifically, if we're going purely off of what was this textbook definition? The physical and biogenetic traits. So let's get real superficial here. Black people have brown skin, right? Darker skin than white people. But what about the African Americans who have the skin disorder vitiligo that results in them having little to no melanin in their skin, where they have those like the patches of literal white or pink skin? You know what I mean? Like, are they just less black now because they don't have that melanin? They don't have that biogenetic trait? That's pretty silly, if you ask me. Like, they're not less black just because their skin is not completely brown. Are white people less white if they get really, really, really tan? No. And so, like, little scenarios like that, like, okay, we have Korean Americans who were born, raised, very well may die in America without ever stepping foot on Korean soil. Does that somehow negate their Korean heritage and culture? Are they somehow less of a Korean ethnicity because they maybe don't speak the language? What if Mexican Americans were never taught Spanish growing up? Are they somehow less authentically Hispanic because they're missing that component of their ethnicity, which according to the textbook definition requires, language, cultural identities, religion, so on and so forth? Are they somehow less of that ethnicity because they don't have that one little component? So you see what I mean? Like, it gets very, very blurry because now, as the world is, relatively getting smaller with travel becoming more accessible, race is becoming less and less credible as a clarifying component to human identity. So you can't really use that like identifier as much anymore because it's quickly disintegrating essentially. So like me and Daniel, if we have kids, they'll be half Korean, half white, right? Easy math. But then what about when they grow up and they have kids? What if they have kids with a Hispanic? Then those kids, what box do our grandkids check on their government forms? You know what I mean? Like, that's only 2 generations away. That could very likely happen in my lifetime. So, and then it's like when you have so many different ethnicities and cultural identities, like, does one take precedence over the other? Like, what box do you check? I don't know. What do you identify as? I don't know. And so very soon, And this is where I was really deep in my rabbit hole of my essay, right? And then at this point, I'm kind of just like having a panic attack because I was like, God, what is reality? Like, what is the truth? Because very soon there won't be just 6 easy boxes to check on government forms that can just, kind of like compartmentalize humans into a predetermined identity and racial group. And so my whole thesis just kind of like fell apart on itself there, because then I was thinking more, because I started and I was like, we shouldn't be compartmentalizing humans by race because it's divisive, it's dangerous to the emotional, the social, the mental health, everything of that, the ethnicities as well. But then, as I was arguing with myself in this essay, then I was like, damn, though, if we blur the lines, one, the lines are already blurred because by definition, it's very easily swayed either way. But then two, the other thing with the issue with this is when you blur those lines between ethnicities, especially, it just opens the door to cultural appropriation. Because plenty of people are obsessed with K-dramas and K-pop, and they speak Korean. They know the Korean culture inside and out. Maybe they've lived in Korea for however long. Who knows? Whatever the case may be. Right? This is just an example. But realistically, even with all of that cultural identity background, that knowledge, knowing the language and everything, they can't just claim that they're Korean, right? But then, like, taking a step further, what if a Caucasian born, raised, dies in Somalia? That's all they've ever known. They've never left Somalia. They practice Islam. They speak only Somali. The whole works, right? Every single aspect of Somali culture and identity and their ethnicity as a whole. 100% this Caucasian was just like embedded in that. That's the only thing they ever knew. Does that make them a Somalian? Like, because we just said, per that textbook dictionary definition, that ethnicity is based on shared social experiences and languages, cultures and identities, etc., etc. Wouldn't that by definition make this person Somalian and subsequently African? I don't know. I mean, it gets blurry. Technically, semantically, yes, but in reality, no. But then again, what do we do when we have a mixture of these cultures? So like Anzaldúa was saying in her book, she's like, all right, what if you're American and you're Mexican? And you've got Native American in you? Like, which box are you going to put yourself into now? Like, which cultural identity are you going to apply to your life that day, basically? Like, it's so fuzzy. And it's really, like I said, the more that we're all evolving, the more that racial tensions and segregations are finally being limited in our society, the more races are intermingling, the more race and ethnicity is kind of like disintegrating. Because like I said, what about when we're all mixed? Then what? Realistically, that's not that far away. And hopefully, and then this is the other thing, and like I said, I think I was viewing it with the wrong mindset when I was writing the essay, because like I said, I was like, shit, how do I solve this? But then I was like, damn, is this even a problem? Because I had kind of seen it as like a problem at first, because I was like, we don't want people to lose their cultural identity. Like, I don't think that's the answer either. Having a melting pot is not actually a good thing. It just means that you're boiling everything down. You're just combining everything and inherently losing all of that history and culture. And you're just kind of making everyone exactly the same. I don't know. That's not really a good thing either. But I don't know. See, I'm down my rabbit hole again. So yeah, I don't, like, it's, in a way, it's a good thing. Like, hopefully that'll keep us from racially profiling and segregating ourselves, and the systemic racism that we're seeing, like, hopefully that goes away if we're all the same. But it's also kind of sad too, because then, like, we're losing that bit of culture and that ethnicity's identity. So I think that's kind of sad too. So I truly do not know. Clearly, I don't have the answer. I don't know if anyone really has the answer, but I would, I'd be very interested to hear y'all's perspective and your take on this. So As always, please feel free to reach out. Join in on my conversation, Gotta love it. Gotta love it. All right, y'all. That is it for this week. I'm going to go ahead and cut off my rant there. Y'all already know the drill. Be a decent human being. Make good choices. And I will catch y'all next week. Okay, bye.